Good, good. Welcome everybody to the special audit regarding the new rules and regulations for contracts and financial regulations. Is there any apologies, substitutions or declarations of interest?
I have apologies from Councillor Curley and Councillor Nelson.
Right.
Are there any declarations of interest?
Okay. Right. Before we start, we were asked to give a report on a particular subject that was in the press. If it appears in the press or anywhere else and it states there's no fraud and you feel you would like more information, you have a right to lift the phone and speak to Alan Puckron, and that's it. But there won't be an investigation into any subject that does not have a fraud on it. If it's been deemed there is no fraud, they have, and it tells you they've checked it out with the Scottish office, and the regulation tells them exactly what they can and can't do, and they have acted within the rules. It's an utter waste of their time going through something to do a report on, but there's nothing to stop you asking questions.
Councillor Rebecca, can I interrupt? Apologise. I think you're referring to a matter that's not on today's agenda.
Sorry,
that's on the agenda for the next meeting of the Audit Committee.
I know that, but to let people know exactly what it was going to be, and I've spoke to Alan that, and I says I would say it today and let everybody know, and it saves us wasting people's time and getting on with the stuff and finding out the information we need the right way about it. That's all I'm trying to say before we start. And when we get through this, if there's anything you're in doubt of, don't be frightened to ask even after it, because there's a lot of stuff here. Okay, Alan, are you quite happy?
Do you want me to introduce the paper for today's meeting, convener? Okay. Yeah, hopefully this is relatively self-explanatory. I'd like to thank both Vicky Pollock and Angela Edmiston, who are both here today, for all the work they've done in pulling together the revised documents. Hopefully the committee will find it relatively straightforward in terms of looking at Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, where the substantive changes to the documents have been highlighted. It's just part of our good governance practice to review these documents on a regular basis. And obviously this time it's been informed by any learning that's taken place through the COVID period as well. Subject to comments that come from the Audit Committee today, these documents, along with the revised scheme of administration and scheme of delegation and standing orders, will go to the next scheduled council meeting on the 17th of February. So both myself, Vicky, Angela are happy to answer any questions that you may have on the proposed changes to the documents. Thank you, convener.
Okay. Okay, we'll go through you want to go through the pages, Alan, from page 6, and let them see what, if anybody is getting the think on, or just.
I think in terms of, it's okay through you, convener, through the appendices. I just think if members have any questions on either document, if they just want to ask them, as long as they refer to the page number, then all members and officers will be able to follow what's going on.
Okay, is there any questions? Hold on, I got it. Line. Right. Okay.
Councillor Rebecca,
Sorry, Stephen. Okay, Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Alan, the question is regard to, I suppose, the third bullet point in paragraph 5.3, which is about the sort of tender value that requires to be accepted by committee. You'll recall, I think, the last time that we reviewed these, some members were concerned about having a level as high as £1 million in terms of that. Personally, I wasn't overly exercised by that, and I'm not overly exercised by it now. But I think it would be useful just to explain to members what sort of safeguards are in place that I suppose would give us comfort that £1 million is an appropriate threshold.
Yep, thank you. I think it was £1 million was proposed, probably I'm thinking about 5-6 years ago by officers, and after discussion it was reduced down to £500,000. Clearly, for the council to undertake any tender exercise, it's got to have a budget in place. If there isn't a budget in place, then we can't go out to tender. That there are checks and balances in terms of how we select tenderers and the financial checks we do on tenderers, the requirements that tenderers have to meet in terms of quality and other matters which are governed through the procurement manual and overseen by David Aiken, who's here today, and his team and colleagues in legal services. So all those checks and balances are in place. And the other point I would make is, in the vast majority of cases at the moment where tenders are at over £500,000, officers get delegated powers from committees to just accept the tenders anyway. There's very, very few tender returns that are actually reported to committee. So the vast majority of ones over £500,000 are just accepted anyway. And then there's retrospective reporting through a 6-monthly report to Policy and Resources that advise members of the results of the tenders exercise, and whether the tender was local or one thing or another. So from that perspective, in terms of speeding up the governance process and ensuring there's no unnecessary delays, officers would certainly commend going up to £1 million for all tender acceptances, and that delegated to officers.
Okay, thanks, Alan.
Natasha?
Thank you, convener. My question is kind of similar to Councillor McCabe's. It's just about, although these limits have been increased, there's still the same level of due diligence given at each level of the tender process, isn't there? It's not that we're saying that they automatically get accepted, it's just that we're saying it doesn't come to ourselves as committees, really.
Through you, convener, yes, absolutely. I mean, this council, I view, has very thorough tender acceptance processes. Sometimes, as officers know, that can lead to a bit of frustration from certain services because of the requirements we set aside for financial compliance, for technical compliance, and the governance that needs to be in place. But this is certainly the direction of travel for the vast majority of procurement now, around things like the real living wage and terms and conditions for employment and things like that, things which I know that elected members are very keen that the council does enforce and have and take a policy view on. So, you know, we've got very thorough controls in place, and we'll continue to apply those and report retrospectively to Policy and Resources Committee on all tenders accepted. That's
great. And just on the point 15 in the standing orders, just about the fair work versus community benefits, I was really pleased to see that there. So thank you. Thanks, convener.
Okay. Provost.
Thanks very much, Channel. It was just a question for Alan, and it's out of curiosity largely. But I see the EU rules and regulations no longer apply. Were they in fact more stringent than the Public Contract Scotland rules?
Convener, this is where I'm very glad that both Vicky and David Aiken are here. So I'll pass over to you, Vicky, but please feel free to pass over to David as well on these matters.
Thank you, through you, convener. No, they haven't changed, Provost. It's now, the European procurement rules are now what's called a find a tender service. So the levels haven't changed. There's just no reference to the European legislation anymore. So they're just the same, they haven't changed, is that right, Vicky? Yes, that's correct. The same standards apply. Okay, yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Vicky. Okay.
Councillor Quinn, Lynn.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Just a couple of quick questions. So obviously I'm okay about the tender process. I can see that process in there. So I'm kind of just looking at the sort of quick quote part of the changes. So just got a couple of questions on that. So can you tell me when the previous limit was set? It's just to get an idea of, you know, that seems like a doubling from 25 to 50 and more than double for the second one. So it's just to get an idea of how long was it reviewed in the past, and also will that in effect speed up the process? You know, there's been some discussion around the procurement process and the quick quote process. Things are taking some time for the council to kind of move ahead with some projects. So will this now speed up the process?
Convener, through you, and again, I'll be happy probably to bring David in this time in terms of the speed of things, but this was probably reviewed only about 3 or 4 years ago, but compared to other councils, Inverclyde has one of the lowest quick quote thresholds in other councils. It's more than even we're proposing here. The advantage of the quick quote process is that under our current procurement rules, that we need to invite a minimum of 4 people, and David will keep me right here, and 2 of those, if possible, should be local. So this gets to the heart of the issues that elected members raise about opportunities for local suppliers to be able to quote and tender for matters. So this will give more opportunities to the local economy. I agree with you, sometimes the quick quote doesn't quite live by its name as a quick quote, but it's still quicker than going out to tender. But David, could you potentially give the committee some idea of the relative timescales of a tender process as opposed to a quick quote process, please?
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks, Alan. Effectively, the timescales would half. You know, if you're going out through an actual tendering process, you would be out for a sort of minimum of 30 days. Realistically, we would do a sort of minimum of 2 weeks as part of a quick quote, but obviously that gives the added flexibility in relation to targeting specifically local suppliers or doing things that is more suited to the council, and it also gives the autonomy to the service. I think in relation to quick quote, it is a very, you know, it's a term that's used loosely because it is still a lot of governance and a lot of checks and balances that have to go through so that we can satisfy our own governance requirements. But I think there's a process ongoing with relation to updating the procurement manual, but also providing templates and guidance and training in relation to procurement awareness. That's part of the new procurement strategy that will be coming to the March committee that will support this as we move on to try and make it more efficient, lean and effectively. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into some of the stuff that's going on at the moment.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Graham Brooks.
Thanks very much. It's continuing on a similar vein. Being part of an ALIO where tendering processes and quotes are received, also part of RSLs, or previously part of an RSL, that officers were not allowed to open the tenders when they came in. It had to go to a board member to be physically opened, and then there was a process for recording them. I'm not aware that elected members have to be present to open a tender. So how do you have the confidence that a tender, well, it could go missing, couldn't it? Or however confidence that the physical envelope that comes in or the email that comes in is processed in the most open and transparent and proper manner, understanding that we have client confidentiality and confidentiality on an economic perspective.
Again, through you, convener, David will be able to give greater detail should members want it, but it's all administered now through the PCS secure system. So effectively, there's no envelopes anymore. Everything comes in a secure environment, which is why the recommendation now is that up to a certain level that a single procurement officer can open the tenders. They can't manipulate anything, they can't do anything. It's just about physically a couple of clicks of the mouse and then they open the tender results. So it's far more secure than it used to be, and Councillor Brooks is right. You know, elected members aren't involved in that process anymore. They don't need to be involved in that process anymore either, because it's down to a single procurement officer now for the vast majority of tender openings. But I don't know if members if they would appreciate more information. David will be able to give you that.
Just obviously, if the system is secure, that's great. But who tells me the system's secure? If it's simply our own officers that are telling me that, so the Audit Scotland have an opinion. How can I be reassured the system is secure?
Alan,
Yeah, Convener,
David.
I can maybe give a wee bit more detail in relation to the Scottish Government have got they own the rights to the system, and obviously as part of that there's ongoing governance requirements not only from their perspective but from our internal perspective. The process has been tried and tested and is fully auditable in any way, shape or form, and effectively it's date stamped and ID stamped for whoever does that and whoever accesses any bit of the system. So it's not only in relation to opening up the initial bids, taking the name of the supplier and coming up with that sort of list of contractors that has bid. There's a full transparent process that you can almost see where anybody's clicked the whole way through that, so you can unpick it from start to finish the right way through the procurement process. So there should be nobody that's effectively opening up the tenders and then jumping a stage to go and look at commercial prices. It's done in a sequential manner, which is audit trail, date stamped, ID stamped the whole way through. And effectively that contract management sits with the Scottish Government at a national level and is applied across all councils, but on top of that is the whole public sector that is using this system and following that governance. So it's not only local authorities. I think there's now a lot of RSLs, NHS, education, APUC, different bodies that are all using the exact same system and process. But if you're ever looking for more detail in relation to the reporting capabilities, that's something I'll be able to request from the Scottish Government, but I can sort of definitely confirm it's auditable within an inch of its life, to be fair.
Lovely. No, that's lovely. Thanks very much, Convener. Thank you.
Graham, I can tell you the old system, when the envelopes came in and they were time stamped, at least this system comes on electronically. So you're sending a tender in, and if there are any complaints, you've got the date and time you sent it in, and that'll be easy to check. And it means even at the inside, they've got it. They can't alter it. So I think it's a better system. I didn't like the timestamp ones years ago because it could have been that somebody says you were out, but it's actually the way the pile came in. But I think this is a better idea, and I hope it works satisfactory for you. But I think it's a lot better that way. So thanks for that, David. Okay, Jim, Councillor McElhenny.
Thanks, Convener. The proposal to bring the health and social care partnership contracts under our one set of procurement standing orders, I take it that's to correct a long-term anomaly, whereas they've had separate rules. So it's just basically a tidy up exercise, have it on in the one suite of documents. Yeah.
Yep. Alan.
Yep, thank you, and again pass over to Vicky. But yes, it's been a wee bit of an anomaly, and it's just to try and make sure that there's a clarity on how all these matters should be treated, because the need for transparency and the requirements is exactly the same, albeit there's different thresholds, and the sort of tenders that you'll go out, the sort of procurement exercises you'll go through for social work sometimes be a bit different from if you're building a school or things like that, but the basic principles are the same. I don't know, Vicky, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Thank you. No, not really. Health and social care contracts were always exempt from the standing orders, and in the background there were procedures in the procurement manual to follow. So they've been kind of brought forward and into the standing orders now.
Quite happy, Jim. Okay, Councillor Stephen McCabe. Stephen.
Yeah, Chan, I was really just going to cover the point that you actually covered in terms of Graham as somebody who's old enough to have attended tender openings with envelopes and also electronic, that being at a tender opening as an elected member is an illusion of control rather than actual control in practice. And I think I agree with you that an electronic system which has got audit checks and balances in it and actually can be audited is certainly a more effective control than opening an envelope, watching somebody write down a number beside a contractor and then going away and thinking nothing could possibly be changed after that, which just isn't the case.
Thank you. Anybody else get anything, other questions? We're quite happy.
Can I just respond? Can I just respond there, please?
Sorry, Graham, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I fully understand, Stephen. Working procurement in Kincaid's many years ago, I fully understand it. But we have one of our Inverclyde Leisure is using that system. So and obviously I know their threshold is different and their board is responsible for their procedures. But obviously Inverclyde Council is a funder and is an alio to us. So I was just interested that as a board member, I'm asked to go into the waterfront to open an envelope, and yet we have this quality and much better system in the council. And it was really for information, but it's also the conversation that as a councillor, we also do fund IL. So there's a question to me there.
No, I mean, if I could just come back to you, I think it's a perfectly valid point. I worked for an RSL for many years and had to regularly get committee members into open tenders. And organisations go through different stages in their evolution. And over time, practices change, etc. And I'm no doubt that at some point in the future, Inverclyde Leisure, RSLs, etc., will move to similar systems. It's just it's a sort of an evolution over time. I mean, the reality is back in the bad old days, councillors used to be involved in allocating houses long before my time, but that's the reality of it. So it does, cultural change takes time.
Okay.
And if I may, convener, just sort of the analogous situation to that is that the organisations that operate like the way that Councillor Brooks has outlined can also quite often have higher value payments being signed off by a board member as well, or two board members having to sign it off, whereas of course no elected member gets involved in signing off any payments. That's down to myself and my team to do that at unlimited. And again, it's because of the checks and balances and the electronic systems that we've got in place, which are not only audited by Audit Scotland, but audited by Andy Priestman and her team on a regular basis.
Thanks for that, Alan. I think it's, well, knowing what the old system was like, sometimes you couldn't even get a councillor to get it done in time and you had to sweat it out. But seriously, I think this is a far better system because of the person putting in the tender has got his own computer, date, time, and when he sent it. And we've got it in ours, and that can match up to, I think there's less chance of, we'll say, mishaps happening. So I'm quite happy with that. Is there anything else that are quite happy with the papers to go forward? And I'll say it, if there's anything you're in doubt about, please don't be frightened to ask the appropriate officers. That way, they'll take any doubts you have and put them aside and you'll know the right answers. Okay? Everybody quite happy with the report that we can look at it and send it on? Thank you. Have a nice quiet day. Let's hope you have a nice weekend, Jim.